What if the key to humanity's survival lay not in its technology, but in its ability to embrace peace? As the stars beckon and the world changes, the journey to understanding and unity is only just beginning. It was the year 1973, a time when the world was on edge. The political landscape was as turbulent as the storms that raged over continents. The Vietnam War was winding down, but its scars were still fresh, and the Cold War loomed large, casting its shadow over every global decision. People were restless, caught between the promises of peace and the realities of conflict. In the midst of this uncertainty, something extraordinary happened, something that would change the course of history. On a quiet, moonlit evening, when the world's attention was absorbed in the ongoing drama of human affairs, a peaceful alien being arrived on Earth. It was not heralded by thunderous sounds or the blinding lights often associated with extraterrestrial visitors in popular culture. Instead, its arrival was soft, almost imperceptible. A gentle light shimmered in the sky, unnoticed by the majority, but felt by those who were awake, attuned to the mysteries of the universe. This being, unlike any of the monstrous invaders depicted in films or books, exuded a quiet calm. Its appearance, sleek and ethereal, was unlike anything the human eye had ever encountered. It came without weaponry or demands, carrying only the message of peace. There was no grand entrance, no show of power, just an invitation to listen. It did not seek to dominate or to take control, but instead to communicate a simple yet profound truth: the possibility of peaceful coexistence. The alien did not speak in the traditional sense, but rather through a deep, resonating connection that bypassed language altogether. Through this bond, humans felt an overwhelming sense of calm and understanding, as if every word it could have spoken had already been understood without utterance. Its presence was not one of fear or hostility, but of reassurance. A silent promise that despite the chaos of Earth's surface, there existed the potential for harmony. News of the being's arrival spread slowly, first in whispers among a small group of witnesses. These were people who had no interest in fame or attention, only a deep understanding that something extraordinary had occurred. The alien communicated that its mission was not one of conquest but of guidance, offering insights into universal truths that transcended borders, politics, and even the boundaries of space and time. Earth, the being explained, was at a crossroads. The challenges that faced humanity, war, hunger, inequality, could be overcome, but only through collective effort, empathy, and peace. As the world remained unaware of the visitor in its midst, the alien patiently waited. It understood that the hearts and minds of humanity needed time to open. It was not here to impose, but to offer an opportunity, an invitation to a better future, one rooted in peace. And so, its mission began. It was a quiet evening in a remote part of the world, far from the bustling cities and the noise of daily life. A small group of individuals, drawn together by chance or perhaps something deeper, found themselves camping in the wilderness. They had no idea that their night would soon be marked by an encounter that would defy all logic and challenge everything they thought they knew about the universe. The air was still, the sky a velvet curtain dotted with stars. As the night deepened, an unfamiliar glow began to creep across the horizon. At first, it was faint, like the reflection of distant lightning, but it grew steadily brighter. One of the campers, a young woman named Sarah, was the first to notice it. She called out to her companions, pointing toward the light, her voice trembling with uncertainty, but no one else could see it at first until it began to take shape. The light became a soft, ethereal presence, hovering just above the treetops. It wasn't blinding or harsh, but rather a calm, inviting illumination that seemed to bend the very air around it. The group of strangers stood motionless, caught between fear and wonder, unsure of what to do. They had no reference for what they were witnessing, no stories that could explain this moment. And then, it happened. The being appeared before them, gliding effortlessly from the light, its form not entirely solid but shimmering with an otherworldly energy. It was humanoid in shape, though its proportions were subtle and graceful, its skin smooth and glowing faintly under the night sky. There was no sound, no wind, just an overwhelming sense of peace that seemed to radiate from its presence. As the group tried to process what they were seeing, the alien's movements were slow and deliberate. It did not approach them in haste, but rather seemed to respect the distance between them, understanding that such an encounter required gentleness. The first words came not as speech, but as a wave of understanding that filled their minds. It was as though the alien was speaking directly to their thoughts, bypassing the need for language entirely. Its message was simple but profound. I am here, and I seek only to know you, as you seek to know me. The thought was not imposing, but comforting, a silent invitation to connect, to share in a moment of pure, unspoken communication. Sarah, whose heart had been racing, felt a deep calm settle within her. It was as though every fear, every doubt she had ever held, had been gently swept away by this being's presence. The group stood in silence, still processing the enormity of what was happening. The alien did not rush them. It waited patiently, allowing them time to absorb what it had just shared. This was a moment that could change everything, but it was also one of profound connection, a peaceful meeting of minds across the stars. In that quiet moment, humanity's first true contact with an alien life form unfolded, not in fear, but in understanding. The beginning of a new chapter for both worlds. As the group stood there, captivated by the alien's serene presence, the atmosphere shifted. The alien, sensing the lingering uncertainty within them, extended its hand toward the ground. In an instant, the air around them seemed to pulse with a low hum, the sound imperceptible, but felt deep in their chests. A strange, transparent screen appeared between them and the alien, as though it were projecting images directly into their minds. There were no words, no spoken language, but instead, vivid scenes unfolded, glimpses of far-off worlds, peaceful landscapes, and vast, starry skies. The alien's culture, as revealed through the images, was one of harmony. It had come from a planet where technology had been advanced beyond human comprehension. But rather than being used for destruction or power, it was employed to foster balance and unity. Their cities were built into the natural landscapes, blending seamlessly with the environment. The alien race had learned to live in complete alignment with nature, understanding that true progress came not from dominating the world around them, but from finding ways to coexist with it. The message was clear. Peace was not just an ideal. It was a way of life woven into every aspect of their society, from their technologies to their very thoughts. The scenes shifted again, showing a history marked by peaceful conflict resolution, where even the most intense disputes had been settled not through force, but through understanding and collaboration. The aliens' race had long ago abandoned war, seeing it as a cycle that only led to destruction. Instead, they had invested their energy into the development of technologies that enhanced communication, allowed for the sharing of resources, and encouraged empathy between different species. The alien didn't just want to observe humanity. It wanted to help guide them toward a future where peace wasn't a fleeting moment, but a sustained reality. As the images faded, the group was left in a stunned silence, their minds full of the message that had been shared. It wasn't just an invitation to peace. It was an invitation to a different way of thinking, of living. The aliens' culture placed no value on conquest or dominance. It viewed power as something to be used for nurturing, for understanding, and for healing. The technology they wielded was not weaponized, but instead was designed to foster growth, enhance creativity, and connect distant worlds in ways that transcended the need for war. The human beings who stood before the alien had heard the message, not just with their ears, but with their hearts. Peace was possible, the aliens seemed to say. But it would require more than a ceasefire or a treaty. It would require a complete shift in perspective, a revolution in how humanity understood strength. True power, the alien conveyed, came from within, from the ability to connect, to build, and to listen. In that moment, it was clear that the aliens' mission was not just to visit Earth. It was to offer humanity a choice, to embrace peace or continue the path of destruction that had, until now, been their way. As the days passed, the initial wonder and awe surrounding the aliens' arrival began to give way to doubt. News of the peaceful visitor spread quickly, sparking a wave of curiosity. But it also ignited a growing concern. Local authorities, who had been hesitant at first, now found themselves under mounting pressure to explain the situation. Scientists, ever the skeptics, began to question the aliens' motives, offering more cautious interpretations of what had transpired. Some claimed that the aliens' actions were too calculated, too perfect, to be entirely benign. Dr. Thomas Hale, a leading astrophysicist, was one of the first to publicly voice concerns. During an interview with a major news outlet, he remarked that while the aliens' behavior seemed peaceful on the surface, its advanced technology and sudden appearance could not be dismissed so easily. "We're dealing with an intelligence that is far beyond anything we understand," Dr. Hale said. "What might seem like peace to us could be something entirely different to them. We can't assume their intentions are purely altruistic just because they have the power to help. Power, in the wrong hands, can have dangerous consequences." Across the city, a similar sense of unease was growing. Local government officials, who had initially sought to keep the aliens' presence under wraps, were now faced with calls for answers. Was this being truly here for peace, or was it part of a larger, more sinister agenda? Some authorities began questioning the aliens' ability to manipulate their minds through non-verbal communication, raising alarms about the potential for mind control. "It's not that I don't believe the alien means us no harm," said Officer Helen Brooks, a longtime member of the police force. "But the fact that it's able to project those images directly into people's heads, bypassing their free will, that's a power we don't understand. And that's something we can't afford to ignore." The skepticism was further amplified by the presence of a small but vocal group of conspiracy theorists who saw the alien as the harbinger of something far more troubling. They suggested that the alien's peaceful facade was merely a cover for a more insidious plot, perhaps an invasion, disguised as benevolence. "They come in peace, yes, but that doesn't mean they're not here to take control," one theorist, Derek Lang, insisted during an impassioned broadcast. "How do we know they haven't already infiltrated our systems, our governments, and are just waiting for the right moment to strike? History has shown us time and again that those who come in peace often have the most to hide." Despite these growing doubts, others stood by their belief that the alien was genuinely offering humanity a chance at peace. But the skeptics' voices were not easily silenced. As interviews continued and public debates heated up, the question remained: was the alien truly a savior, or was it a carefully crafted illusion, hiding its true motives behind a veil of peace? The uncertainty loomed, and humanity found itself at a crossroads, unsure whether to trust the alien's message or to prepare for a threat they could not yet comprehend. As the alien's presence became undeniable, the media quickly caught wind of the story. What had begun as a small, isolated event in a remote part of the world now became a global phenomenon. News outlets from every corner of the earth clamored for exclusive reports, interviews, and footage of the peaceful visitor. The alien, once thought to be a solitary anomaly, had become the central point of conversation across nations, sparking debates in homes, offices, and government chambers alike. Television broadcasts, radio stations, and social media platforms became filled with speculation, questions, and conflicting narratives. On one hand, there were those who embraced the arrival as a historic moment, a turning point in human history. "This could be the greatest gift we've ever received," declared one prominent anchor, his voice filled with awe as he discussed the possibility of intergalactic peace. Yet, on the other side, voices of caution grew louder. As humanity collectively confronted the idea of extraterrestrial life, the realization that no one knew for sure whether the aliens' intentions were as pure as they appeared sent a ripple of anxiety through the public. In the halls of power, political leaders were divided. Some saw the alien as a potential ally, an advanced civilization with the capability to solve the world's greatest problems. President Maria Solis of the United States, in an address to the nation, spoke of the incredible opportunity for peace, stating, "We are witnessing a moment that has the potential to elevate us as a species." The prospect of collaborating with an extraterrestrial intelligence is not only a marvel, it could be the very thing that unites our divided world. But not all political leaders were so eager to embrace the aliens' message. A growing faction of world leaders voiced their concerns, questioning whether it was wise to trust an entity whose true motives were still unknown. Chancellor Viktor Volkov of Russia was one of the most outspoken critics, warning against the rush to welcome the visitor. "We cannot afford to let our curiosity blind us," he said in a televised address. "There is much we do not understand. What guarantees do we have that this being has no hidden agenda? If it comes in peace, it is for us to decide whether we are willing to accept it." International summits were quickly convened, with diplomats from every major nation gathering to discuss the implications of the aliens' arrival. Some proposed forming a global coalition to approach the situation with caution, ensuring that the aliens' presence would be monitored and that no one nation would act unilaterally. Others argued for immediate action, suggesting that humanity should seize the moment and attempt to establish a first contact protocol, an official means of communication. The debate raged on, with both sides offering compelling arguments. Some saw the alien as a potential savior, while others viewed it as a threat to the delicate balance of power that defined geopolitics. As the days passed, the world became more divided than ever. It wasn't just the question of the aliens' intentions that caused the rift. It was the realization that humanity itself had yet to come to a consensus on how to face the unknown. In the midst of the uncertainty, one truth remained clear. The arrival of the alien had changed the course of history forever, and the world would never be the same. As the world grappled with its divided response to the alien's presence, something unexpected happened. The alien, recognizing the tension and uncertainty that its arrival had stirred, made an offer that would shake humanity to its core. One quiet evening, as news channels broadcasted another round of debates, a new transmission was received. The alien had spoken, not through words, but through a visual display of dazzling lights and geometric shapes that transcended language. What it showed was an image of technology far beyond what Earth's current capabilities had achieved. Machines that could heal the sick with a touch, energy sources that could power cities for centuries, and systems that could reverse environmental damage on a global scale. This gift, the alien explained, was not just a token of goodwill. It was a chance for humanity to reshape its future. The advanced technology, it seemed, had the potential to solve every problem that had plagued the world: hunger, disease, pollution, and war. But there was one condition: humanity would have to choose to use it wisely, as a unified force, not divided by borders, ideologies, or the pursuit of power. The world watched in awe as the alien shared blueprints of unimaginable devices. Machines that could purify water and air in an instant, devices that could heal physical injuries within seconds, and clean energy sources that could replace fossil fuels entirely. There were promises of an age where disease was no longer a fear, where resources were no longer scarce, and where the planet's ecosystems could be restored to their original vibrance. Yet, As quickly as the promise of peace and prosperity swept across the globe, so did the undercurrent of fear. The fear of the unknown, of the immense power now at humanity's disposal, was palpable. Could such power truly be wielded responsibly? There were those who feared that this gift, no matter how well-intentioned, could fall into the wrong hands. Could rogue governments or powerful corporations seize control of the alien technology, twisting it to their own advantage? Could it be used to subjugate rather than liberate? Leaders around the world, who had once argued for cautious optimism or outright distrust, were now faced with a new dilemma. How could they manage such power? The United Nations convened in emergency sessions, attempting to draft new global laws that would govern the use of the technology. Some proposed that a global coalition be established to oversee its distribution, ensuring it was used for the collective good. Others, more skeptical, warned against any unilateral action, fearful that any steps toward cooperation would result in a loss of sovereignty or control. The potential for a technological revolution was undeniable. The aliens' gift was a beacon of hope, but it was also a mirror, reflecting humanity's deepest flaws, greed, fear, and the constant struggle for power. As the world's governments wrestled with the implications of this unparalleled opportunity, one thing became clear. The aliens' gift had the potential to change everything, for better or for worse. Whether humanity could rise to the occasion, using this technology to unite and heal, or whether it would fall into chaos, was now the greatest question facing the planet. As the aliens' presence on Earth stirred global reactions, many began to look back at the history of UFO sightings, seeking connections between this unprecedented encounter and the mysterious events that had occurred for decades. Experts, once relegated to the fringe, were suddenly given a platform to speak. Their voices, once ignored, now carried weight as they reflected on the strange patterns that had defined the UFO phenomenon throughout history. Flashbacks flooded the minds of many, recalling the strange lights in the sky that had been seen by individuals in remote areas, the sudden disappearances of aircraft, and the unexplained craft that appeared out of nowhere. The year 1947, the Roswell incident, was often mentioned. A mysterious crash that had fueled years of speculation about extraterrestrial life. It had been dismissed as a weather balloon or a military cover-up, but now, with the alien presence in 1973, many wondered if it had been the first of many encounters, quietly observed but never fully understood. The recurring nature of these sightings began to form a pattern. From the early reports in the 1950s to the more recent accounts from military personnel, civilians, and astronauts, the presence of UFOs had always been marked by their sudden appearances, their swift departures, and the profound silence that often followed. Each encounter seemed to leave more questions than answers, and each was dismissed or explained away by experts who found themselves struggling to reconcile the evidence with conventional scientific understanding. Now, with the aliens standing before humanity, the question on everyone's mind was no longer whether extraterrestrial life existed, but why it had taken so long for contact to be made. Why had these beings chosen 1973 as the year to reveal themselves? Were these past sightings simply the precursors to this monumental event, a gradual build-up to something greater? Or had something changed in the universe that made this moment inevitable? Experts discussed the implications of these recurring phenomena with a mix of awe and caution. Some suggested that the repeated sightings could be part of a larger, purposeful design, an observation from afar, an ongoing study of Earth, and perhaps an experiment to see how humanity would respond to such an encounter. Others proposed that the phenomena were connected to the aliens' decision to make its peaceful arrival now, hinting that these sightings were signals of its imminent presence, as if it had been preparing for this very moment. The aliens' technology, displayed so openly, added weight to these theories. Some argued that these sightings weren't random at all, but part of a calculated strategy to ease humanity into the idea of contact with the unknown. What had once been dismissed as unexplained phenomena was now beginning to make sense in a much larger context. As the world's eyes turned to the skies, the connections between past sightings and the present encounter seemed to draw an unspoken line, one that pointed to a truth far beyond the one-dimensional view of extraterrestrial life that humanity had held for so long. It was not a question of what was out there, but why it had chosen now to make its presence known. The answers, it seemed, were still just out of reach. As the aliens' presence continued to captivate the world, not everyone was willing to accept this peaceful arrival. A growing faction of humans, including political leaders, military officials, and influential figures, began to voice their deep concerns about the implications of such a dramatic shift. Their resistance was rooted in fear, a fear that control, once firmly held, might slip away. The very idea that a being from another world could offer humanity not just advanced technology, but a vision of peace and global unity, left them uneasy. To some, it felt as though the fabric of society was being upended, and the aliens' peaceful overture was a challenge to the power structures they had spent their lives cultivating. These individuals, known to some as the guardians of humanity, argued that the aliens' gift came at too high a price. The technology, so advanced and promising, could easily be turned against humanity. The idea of surrendering so much power to an unknown entity, no matter how peaceful its message, seemed reckless. For these skeptics, the real question was not whether the aliens sought peace, but whether humanity was ready to relinquish its autonomy to something or someone beyond its control. They feared the aliens' benevolent gestures might be part of a larger, hidden agenda, a strategy to guide humanity in ways they could not yet comprehend. Tensions within society grew, dividing those who wished to embrace the aliens' message and those who would reject it at all costs. Protests erupted in major cities, with factions forming around the aliens' peaceful ideology and those who felt threatened by its implications. Political leaders found themselves at odds, struggling to navigate the delicate balance between engaging with the alien and protecting their sovereignty. Military forces, wary of being rendered obsolete by the aliens' technology, began to question their role in this new world order. Some argued that humanity needed to assert its dominance, reinforcing borders and maintaining its power, while others, emboldened by the aliens' offer, pushed for a united global front. In a few isolated pockets, underground movements formed, dedicated to resisting any form of cooperation with the alien. These groups advocated for armed rebellion, their rhetoric fueled by fear and suspicion. They believed that humanity had survived for so long because of its independence, and that the aliens' influence would inevitably lead to a loss of identity and autonomy. For them, the alien was a symbol of everything they feared: the erosion of free will, the abandonment of humanity's rightful place in the universe. As the weeks passed, the debate intensified. Communities split, families found themselves divided, and leaders scrambled to offer solutions. But one thing was clear: the aliens' peaceful arrival had triggered a profound crisis of trust and control. As the world faced an uncertain future, some felt they had no choice but to resist, even if it meant rejecting the possibility of peace. In their eyes, the cost of losing control, no matter the promise, was too high to bear. The aliens' arrival sparked not just curiosity, but a profound desire to understand its origins. As the world sought answers, more information about its home planet emerged, painting a picture of an advanced civilization that had long transcended the violence and turmoil that had plagued humanity for millennia. The alien, with its serene demeanor and calm approach, spoke of a world that was nothing like Earth, a world where peace was not just an ideal, but a fundamental law of existence. Its species, it explained, had evolved in a way that allowed them to leave behind the chaos of war, conflict, and destruction that had once defined their past. Over centuries, they had discovered a universal philosophy of peace, a philosophy that rejected domination and embraced understanding and cooperation. From this alien's home planet, peace had become more than a political or social construct. It had become an integral part of their existence, woven into the very fabric of their society. They viewed the universe not as a battleground, but as a shared space for learning and growth. The aliens' journey to Earth, which had taken it across vast stretches of space, was not driven by conquest or curiosity alone, but by a deep-rooted belief in the power of unity. This philosophy, it explained, had guided its people for generations, allowing them to expand beyond their home world without ever resorting to violence or manipulation. Their advanced technology was not meant to control, but to aid, to offer solutions that could elevate every civilization they encountered. The journey itself, an intergalactic odyssey, had been long and perilous. The aliens spoke of traveling through nebulae and across light years of space, navigating the unknown, guided by the principles of peace and mutual respect. It had encountered other civilizations, some of which had embraced the message of peace and flourished, while others had rejected it, choosing destruction instead. The aliens' mission on Earth was one of hope, a hope that this young, turbulent planet could find its own path to peace before it spiraled further into chaos. Through its stories, a deeper understanding emerged. The alien civilization had reached a point where war and aggression were seen as relics of the past. The suffering caused by conflict, once seen as inevitable, was now understood to be a choice that could be unmade. The aliens' people had learned to listen, to communicate not only through words but through shared understanding, to see themselves as part of a greater whole. As humanity listened, it became clear that the aliens' message was not just about technological advancement or political alignment. It was about fostering an intergalactic understanding, a shared vision of peace that transcended borders, species, and planets. What seemed like an impossible dream to many on Earth was, for the alien, a reality. But could humanity make that leap? Could Earth embrace this universal philosophy of peace, or would its divisions and fears tear it apart before it even had the chance? The aliens' message was clear, time would tell, but the path to peace was always open, if only humans were willing to walk it. The aliens' presence on Earth became even more enigmatic as it revealed a truth that had been carefully concealed. It was not just an individual traveler, nor was its mission a solitary one. The alien, with its calm and measured tone, spoke of a greater responsibility. It carried one that extended far beyond the borders of Earth and its limited understanding of the universe. It was a member of a galactic council, a collective of advanced civilizations scattered across the cosmos, united by one singular goal: to foster peace and cooperation throughout the stars. This council, it explained, was not a governing body in the traditional sense. There was no empire, no centralized authority that dictated the terms of existence. Instead, it was a coalition of like-minded civilizations that had come together over countless millennia to share knowledge, promote understanding, and, most importantly, ensure that conflict and violence did not define the fate of the universe. The alien, as part of this council, was not a diplomat in the sense that humans would understand. It was a guide, a messenger, a representative of the shared vision that connected all the council members. The council's purpose was not to impose its will, but to offer assistance to those civilizations willing to listen. It operated in the background, watching as younger, less evolved worlds stumbled through their own growing pains, hoping to intervene before destruction took hold. The arrival of the alien on Earth, as it turned out, was not an isolated event but part of a much larger mission. Earth, still divided by war and strife, was seen as a critical juncture. The Council had been monitoring the planet for centuries, observing its potential for peace, and the constant threat of self-destruction. The aliens' mission was clear: to offer humanity the opportunity to break free from its cycles of conflict and embrace a new path, a path that had been walked by others in the galaxy long before. The aliens spoke of countless other worlds, civilizations that had once been as divided and violent as Earth, but had transcended their past. These civilizations, having embraced peace and cooperation, had not only survived but thrived, reaching out across the stars with open hands rather than weapons. Their knowledge, their technology, their way of life had spread, not through conquest but through shared wisdom. The Council, it explained, was not a force of unity through domination, but a peaceful collective that encouraged the blossoming of civilizations, each with its own unique contributions to the galactic whole. But Earth, with all its potential, was teetering on the brink. The aliens' arrival was no accident. It had been sent as a messenger, part of a larger, coordinated effort to see whether humanity was willing to take the first step toward a greater understanding. The Galactic Council was watching, waiting to see if this young, fragile species could rise above its divisions and embrace the vision of peace that had already transformed countless others in the cosmos. The weight of the galaxy seemed to rest on Earth's shoulders, and the alien, humble as it appeared, held within it the hopes of a universe that believed in the possibility of peace. The choice, as always, was up to humanity. The aliens' presence on Earth had already begun to spark intense curiosity, but it was the revelation of its technology that truly shook the foundations of human understanding. With a calm confidence, the alien revealed its power, an immense, almost unimaginable capability that could reshape the planet. The technology it wielded was not just advanced, it was transformative. The alien spoke of energy systems that could generate limitless clean power, drawing from the natural forces of the universe itself, providing solutions to the planet's energy crises that had plagued humanity for centuries. There was no need for fossil fuels, no emissions, no pollution. It was a power that could fuel cities, industries, and entire countries without ever depleting the resources of the planet. But that was not all. The alien also unveiled the promise of advanced medical technology, capable of healing ailments that had long been beyond the reach of human doctors. Diseases, once thought incurable, could be eradicated. Lifespans could be extended, and suffering alleviated. The alien spoke of technologies that could reverse the damage done to the human body by aging, even offering cures for conditions that had ravaged societies for millennia. It was the kind of technology that, if shared with the world, could eliminate much of the pain and hardship that defined human existence. However, as the alien shared this profound gift, the question arose that had been lurking in the minds of many: should such power be freely given to Earth? The potential for humanity to misuse it was undeniable. With such power at their fingertips, what would Earth's leaders, corporations, and individuals do? Could the technology be trusted to those who had historically shown a tendency toward greed and war? Would the very gift that was meant to elevate humanity become another tool of control, corruption, and conflict? The alien, understanding the gravity of the decision, did not offer the technology freely. Instead, it posed a challenge. It spoke of the responsibility that came with such power, stressing that Earth's readiness to wield it was uncertain. Would humanity rise above its history of exploitation and division? Or would it, once again, fail to use such incredible advancements wisely? The alien suggested that it was not just the technology that needed to be evaluated, but the state of humanity itself. Could the species handle such a gift without repeating the mistakes of the past? Could they be trusted to guide themselves with wisdom, rather than succumb to the temptations of power? The decision was not an easy one. As the alien's words echoed in the minds of those present, it became clear that this was not just about technology. It was about the future of humanity itself. Should this gift be shared, knowing that the potential for both salvation and destruction existed in equal measure? It was a question that would haunt humanity for years to come. The alien, in its quiet wisdom, left the world with more than just an answer. It left a choice that only humanity could make. As news of the aliens' intentions spread across the globe, the world's leaders, scientists, and philosophers gathered in a momentous summit, hoping to unravel the true nature of the visitors' motives. It was a historic meeting, one that saw the brightest minds of Earth seated at the same table as a being whose origins, technology, and philosophy were beyond comprehension. The aliens' arrival had ignited curiosity, wonder, and fear in equal measure. But now, the question that consumed every individual in that room was clear. What did it truly want? The summit was held in a secure, undisclosed location, surrounded by the highest levels of global security. World leaders arrived first, each with their own agendas, eager to understand what the aliens' presence meant for their countries. The tension was palpable, as representatives from all corners of the world eyed one another, some with hope, others with skepticism. The stakes were higher than any political negotiations they had ever faced. At the same table sat the scientists, physicists, biologists, and engineers, whose minds raced with the implications of the aliens' technology. What did the alien know that Earth had yet to discover? How could such a civilization exist so far ahead of human progress? The questions were endless, but so too were the dangers. Some scientists speculated that the aliens' technology could shift the balance of power in ways that would alter the global order forever. Would it be used to uplift humanity, or would it become a tool of war and control? Philosophers, too, found their place in the gathering, pondering the deeper questions that arose from the aliens' visit. The prospect of intelligent life beyond Earth had always been a subject of debate. What did this reveal about humanity's place in the cosmos? Was Earth just one planet among many, or did the aliens' presence mark a pivotal turning point in human history? These thinkers questioned whether humanity was ready for the responsibility that came with the knowledge the alien carried. The alien, for its part, remained calm and composed, seemingly understanding the gravity of the discussions unfolding before it. It did not rush to answer, nor did it seek to influence the course of the debates. It sat quietly, offering only subtle gestures, signaling its willingness to listen but never imposing its views on the gathered minds. The alien had made it clear that it sought only peace, but its silence left room for the human leaders to interpret its motives in different ways. As the debates unfolded, a palpable sense of distrust simmered beneath the surface. While some argued that the aliens' technology should be embraced, others feared the consequences of placing so much power in the hands of an extraterrestrial being. Could the alien truly be trusted? Or was there something hidden in its motives that remained out of reach? Were its peaceful intentions genuine, or was there a more complex agenda at play? The summit ended without a clear resolution. The minds that had gathered to unlock the mystery of the aliens' presence left with more questions than answers. Trust had not yet been established, but suspicion lingered in the air, thick as fog. What came next was uncertain, but one thing was clear. Humanity stood at a precipice, poised to either embrace a new future or turn away from the opportunity to change its destiny. The world would have to decide. The aliens' offer came at a time when global tensions were at their peak, political divides were deepening, nations were arming themselves with ever more powerful weapons, and diplomacy seemed to be faltering. It was in this climate of mistrust and fear that the alien, ever calm and composed, proposed a role that none had expected: a peacekeeper, not just in the sense of intervening in conflict, but in serving as an intermediary, guiding humanity towards disarmament and diplomatic resolution. The alien's voice, though not one we could hear in the conventional sense, resonated with a sense of urgency, as though it understood that humanity was on the brink of something irreversible. Its message was simple: the power to resolve conflicts lay not in force, but in the understanding and cooperation of nations. The alien presented itself as a neutral party, free of any political affiliation or self-interest, offering to act as a bridge between the warring factions of Earth. It spoke of a future where weapons of mass destruction were not the tools of power, but symbols of a dark past that humanity could leave behind. With the aliens' advanced technology and cosmic perspective, it suggested peace was not just possible, it was achievable. At first, the leaders of the world were skeptical. Some reacted with immediate distrust, refusing to entertain the notion of an extraterrestrial being involving itself in earthly matters. They questioned the aliens' motives. Was it truly neutral? Or was it subtly pushing its own agenda under the guise of peace? The idea that a being from another world could possess the wisdom to solve human conflict was a hard pill to swallow, even for those who were already open to the aliens' peaceful intentions. Some leaders saw it as an opportunity to break free from the endless cycles of war and strife. They recognized that the alien, with its unmatched technological prowess and otherworldly perspective, could offer the kind of solutions that Earth's diplomats had failed to achieve for centuries. But there was still hesitation, especially among those who had built their power on military strength and strategic alliances. Would accepting the aliens' offer be seen as a surrender? Would it weaken their position on the global stage? There were those who cautiously agreed to entertain the idea. Secret talks were held in quiet, secure locations, as representatives from various nations began to discuss the aliens' proposal. They spoke of disarmament, of laying down their weapons in favor of dialogue and cooperation. But each nation's pride and fear of losing influence stood in the way. It was one thing to speak of peace in theory, but another to put it into practice. As the talks continued, a growing divide emerged. Some saw the alien as a divine intervention, a chance to turn away from the violence and destruction that had marked human history. Others saw it as a threat to their power and sovereignty, unwilling to cede control to an unknown entity, no matter how noble its intentions might seem. The tension in the room was palpable, with the future of the planet hanging in the balance. Would humanity take the aliens' hand and embrace peace, or would fear and pride drive them further down a path of destruction? Only time would tell. As the aliens' message began to resonate more deeply within the hearts and minds of people across the world, a slow but undeniable shift took place. What had started as a cautious conversation among leaders and scientists soon blossomed into a global movement. People from every corner of the earth, regardless of their nationality or background, began to embrace the idea of unity over division, peace over conflict. The alien, with its serene demeanor and unwavering conviction, had planted the seed for something far greater than anyone had anticipated, a dream of global harmony. The movement, which began as an intellectual debate, quickly transformed into a cultural revolution. People gathered in cities, villages, and towns, holding rallies and discussions on how humanity could come together to build a world free of war and fear. The once distant and abstract ideals of peace, shared responsibility, and collaboration became tangible goals. Young people, especially, led the charge, their voices filled with hope and determination. They believed that the time had come for humanity to cast aside the old paradigms of violence and strife, to embrace a new future shaped by mutual respect and understanding. The aliens' philosophy was simple, yet profound. Every being, every nation, every culture had something to contribute to the greater good of the cosmos. It wasn't about dominance or superiority. It was about the collective progress of all. This message resonated deeply with the disillusioned, the weary, and the hopeful alike. People who had once been caught in the cycles of hate, fear, and competition began to see the possibility of a world where collaboration replaced conflict. Cultural shifts unfolded across the globe as old prejudices and barriers began to dissolve. The idea of borders, both literal and metaphorical, began to feel increasingly irrelevant. The aliens' peaceful presence encouraged people to see each other as part of a larger, interconnected whole. Communities, once fractured by centuries of division, began to reach across their differences to work together, driven by the belief that they were all part of something much greater than themselves. In schools, universities, and places of worship, the teachings of the alien were discussed and debated. Philosophers, theologians, and social leaders took up the mantle, exploring how these ideals could be woven into the fabric of human society. Books were written, art was created, and music filled the air, all inspired by the dream of unity. Even industries once dominated by competition and self-interest began to reflect a newfound emphasis on collaboration and sustainability. Yet, as the movement grew, so did the opposition. There were those who feared the loss of identity, the erosion of cultural values, and the potential dangers of abandoning traditional systems of power. But for every skeptic, there were countless others who saw the aliens' message as a beacon of hope, a chance to break free from the destructive cycles of history. It was a long, slow journey, but for the first time in human history, the dream of unity seemed within reach. And as more people embraced the dream, the world began to change one heart, one mind, one nation at a time. As the movement for peace grew, so too did the forces opposed to it. At first, these forces remained in the shadows, quiet and uncertain. But as the dream of global unity began to take root, they grew bolder. Fueled by fear, mistrust, and the belief that their power and influence were being threatened, factions began to rally against the aliens' efforts. Their resistance wasn't just political, it was deeply emotional, tied to years of historical grievances, cultural pride, and the sense of identity that many feared was being erased in the name of peace. Global leaders who had once embraced the aliens' message of unity now found themselves facing fierce opposition from within their own countries. Hardliners, entrenched in the old ways of thinking, refused to accept the notion that peace could be achieved without dominance or control. They viewed the aliens' influence as a dangerous, foreign imposition, one that undermined centuries of traditions and hierarchies that had defined their world. In secret meetings, these leaders conspired to sabotage the aliens' efforts, using every tool at their disposal to create division and doubt. Misinformation spread rapidly, painting the aliens' presence as a threat rather than a blessing. It wasn't just the alien that was vilified, it was the dream of unity itself. Tensions began to rise in every corner of the globe. The peace movement, once so full of hope and optimism, now faced violent backlash. Protests erupted in the streets, not in celebration of the aliens' message, but in anger at what some perceived as the erosion of their way of life. These protests weren't just about politics, they were about fear of the unknown, fear that the fabric of society was being pulled apart, and that the familiar world they knew was slipping from their grasp. In some places, the protests turned into riots, and in others, covert operations sought to disrupt the summit of world leaders, hoping to sow seeds of division among those still willing to listen to the alien. The media, once a vehicle for spreading the aliens' message, now became a battleground. Some outlets, under the influence of hardline factions, began to vilify the alien, casting it as a manipulative force bent on taking control of humanity. They amplified fears of the unknown, weaving tales of hidden agendas and nefarious plots. On the other side, those still loyal to the idea of peace pushed back, using every form of media to counter the lies and misinformation. But the divide was widening, and the air of mistrust was palpable. In the halls of power, leaders who had once embraced the message of unity were now struggling to maintain control. They found themselves torn between their desire to bring peace to the world and the growing influence of those who rejected it. Internal resistance from hardliners in their own cabinets, military officials, and industries began to chip away at their resolve. As the alien's presence became more entrenched, the question loomed larger. Would humanity be able to overcome its own resistance to peace, or would it tear itself apart before ever reaching the dream it had so briefly dared to believe in? As the world descended further into chaos, the alien's message shifted, becoming urgent, almost desperate. The calm, peaceful being who had once only sought to share wisdom now spoke of something far darker, a warning that would change everything. The alien, with its serene composure, explained that its presence on Earth was not simply to usher in a new age of peace, but also to offer humanity a chance to avert a disaster of cosmic proportions. The alien described a great cosmic event, one that had been set in motion long before Earth's birth, a force that had been silently growing, waiting for the right moment to strike. This event was not some natural disaster or an act of war, but a cataclysmic convergence of energies from across the universe, an impending collision between forces that humanity could neither predict nor control. The alien spoke of the delicate balance that kept the cosmos in harmony, a balance that was now at risk due to humanity's greed, violence, and reckless exploitation of resources. The alien's voice was calm, yet there was an unmistakable edge of sorrow in its tone. It explained that the universe was a finely tuned system, and that Earth's actions were now threatening that equilibrium. The unchecked pollution, the nuclear weapons, the environmental destruction, all of it had sent ripples across the fabric of space-time, disturbing energies that humanity could not yet comprehend. The alien warned that if these patterns continued, Earth would become a target, caught in the crossfire of a universal catastrophe. The realization hit with a crushing weight. This was no longer just about peace or unity on Earth. The stakes had grown higher. Humanity's survival was at risk, not from an external enemy, but from its own failure to recognize the interconnectedness of all life in the universe. The alien spoke of a collective responsibility, a call for global action that transcended borders and ideologies. It urged the leaders of Earth to put aside their differences and act as one, not just for the sake of peace, but for the survival of the planet itself. Humanity was faced with a choice: to change its ways, to embrace the peace the alien had offered, or to continue down the path of destruction and face the consequences. The alien's warning was clear, and yet it was a plea for understanding, for growth, for unity. It reminded Earth's inhabitants that they were not isolated in the vast expanse of the universe, but part of a greater cosmic order, one that demanded balance, respect, and responsibility. The alien's words hung in the air, heavy and foreboding. There was no time to waste. The call for action was now more urgent than ever, and the future of Earth rested in the hands of those who could see beyond their own conflicts and understand the gravity of the universal disaster looming on the horizon. As the world faced the alien's warning and the overwhelming threat of cosmic disaster, the greatest battles were not fought in boardrooms or on battlefields, but within the hearts and minds of those who stood at the crossroads of fear and hope. Among the many stories that emerged during this time, the most poignant were those of personal transformation, where individuals grappled with their deepest doubts and insecurities. Sarah, a high-ranking government official, had always prided herself on her practicality. She had built a career on decisiveness, on knowing the right course of action in times of crisis. Yet, as the alien's words reverberated through the global consciousness, she found herself questioning everything. The alien's calm presence had struck a chord within her, yet she was torn between the responsibility she felt toward her country and the rising sense of unity she could now see on the horizon. Could the world truly come together? Was it even possible to overcome the divisions that had been entrenched for centuries? The weight of these questions began to haunt her as she lay awake at night, pondering the future. Could she, someone who had been part of the system that perpetuated conflict, be the change the world needed? Or would fear, the same fear that had fueled her career, be the force that held humanity back? Across the globe, in a small village that had been ravaged by years of civil unrest, there was Amira, a woman whose life had been defined by the scars of war. Her family had lost everything to the relentless cycle of violence. She had long ago built walls around her heart, convinced that peace was an unattainable dream. But as the alien's message spread, she began to notice something stirring deep within her, a flicker of hope, a tiny spark that reminded her of the peace her ancestors had once known. But that same hope was accompanied by a fear of disappointment, of believing in something that could ultimately fail. As she attended one of the first local meetings to discuss the alien's vision of unity, she saw faces much like her own faces, full of fear, yes, but also of tentative optimism. For the first time in years, she wondered if it was possible to lay down her arms, not just in the world around her, but within herself. These inner struggles were mirrored in countless others, people torn between the comfort of the familiar and the uncertainty of change. In the cities, in the countryside, in the halls of power, and in the corners of quiet homes, there was a quiet revolution happening. People were discovering that peace, true peace, was not just something that could be imposed from the outside. It was something that had to begin within, in the hearts of each individual who dared to hope for something better. Sarah's decision, Amira's quiet reflection, and countless other personal transformations formed the bedrock of what would become the global movement. For peace to take root in the world, it first had to be embraced by each soul, facing the same question: could hope and fear exist side by side, and still peace prevail? As the promise of the aliens' advanced technology began to shape the future, humanity found itself at a crossroads between its insatiable hunger for progress and the wisdom imparted by their cosmic visitor. The aliens' teachings had been clear: balance was the key to harmony. Yet, in the face of unprecedented power, the old human instincts for greed, control, and dominance began to resurface. The aliens' gift was nothing short of revolutionary, unlimited clean energy, cures for diseases that had plagued humanity for centuries, and the means to heal a wounded planet. It was a promise that could elevate life to unimaginable heights. But as the discussions around how to use the technology intensified, so did the division. Some saw the technology as a chance to rebuild and create a more just world, to mend the rifts that had torn societies apart. Others, however, saw it as an opportunity for gain, a chance to dominate on a global scale. The old power structures, now threatened by the notion of equality and shared prosperity, found ways to manipulate the alien technology for their own ends. The race to control this new power became a battle in itself, one that had the potential to either uplift or destroy humanity. The alien, who had come to Earth as a harbinger of peace, had spoken of the dangers of imbalance. Greed, it warned, could turn a blessing into a curse, for power unchecked would always corrupt. Yet, despite these words, humanity's flaws seemed impossible to escape. Corporations and governments, driven by the age-old desire to control resources and maintain dominance, began to draft laws and policies that would prioritize their own interests over the collective good. They sought to monopolize the alien technology, stockpiling its potential for future leverage. In a world that was still learning how to coexist, the promise of this alien technology had now become a source of tension. For some, it was a symbol of hope, a beacon that illuminated the possibility of a brighter future. For others, it was an arms race waiting to happen. Would humanity use this gift to elevate its global community, or would it once again fall victim to the darker aspects of its nature? The alien watched from afar, its presence a constant reminder of the fragile balance between what was possible and what was dangerous. Its teachings had never been more relevant. Power, no matter how advanced, required responsibility. Without wisdom to guide it, technology could just as easily become a weapon as a tool for progress. The world stood on the brink, not just of technological revolution, but of a deeper moral reckoning. Could humanity, armed with such power, resist the urge to dominate? Or would it fall into the trap of using this gift to reinforce old hierarchies? The stakes had never been higher, and the aliens' words echoed louder than ever. Balance, above all, is the true path to peace. Yet, as the world debated, the question lingered. Would humanity heed the warning, or would it continue down the same path of destruction and division it had always known? As the aliens' message of peace continued to spread across Earth, there were whispers subtle at first, then growing louder that not all was as it seemed. What had begun as an unassuming, hopeful movement now faced an unsettling revelation. Not all alien factions were united in their vision for humanity. The alien that had arrived with promises of peace, with technology that could cure diseases and heal the planet, was not the only one of its kind. Unbeknownst to the leaders of Earth, there was a deeper, darker agenda at play. A faction within the alien race itself, one that viewed humanity's potential not as something to nurture, but as something to control. This faction had quietly infiltrated Earth's new order, pulling strings from the shadows. While the majority of the alien visitors preached unity, cooperation, and harmony, there was a select group among them who saw humanity's chaotic, passionate nature as something to be molded and manipulated. Their true mission was not to free Earth from its strife, but to harness its potential for their own ends. They believed humanity, with all its ambition and fervor, could serve as a valuable tool to further their own galactic aspirations. The first signs of this hidden agenda began to surface in the form of unexplained anomalies. Minor inconsistencies in the aliens' technology, discrepancies in their accounts of their mission, and most troubling of all, the sudden appearance of factions among the alien visitors themselves. There were those who began to question the legitimacy of the aliens' promises, wondering if some of the gifts offered were laced with subtle forms of control. What if the cures and energy sources provided were not entirely free from strings attached? What if the aliens had not come simply to help, but to subtly guide and influence the trajectory of human evolution in a way that served their hidden interests? The conspiracy began to take shape as a small group of insiders, some from the scientific and political realms, started piecing together the fragmented evidence. The aliens' messages had grown more complex over time, and small groups of humans, individuals with access to classified information and advanced technologies, began to realize that the peaceful mission might be a facade for something far more insidious. These humans, some with ties to military and intelligence agencies, started meeting in secret, exchanging theories and observations. They had uncovered fragments of intercepted alien communications, hints of strategies designed not to heal, but to subtly dominate Earth's leadership and resources. There was talk of a hidden plan, one that, if left unchecked, could see Earth transformed into a subjugated world, a stepping stone for the alien faction's expansionist goals. As the truth of this underground movement began to emerge, the question loomed. Could humanity trust the alien message, or had it all been part of a much larger scheme? The divide between trust and suspicion began to widen, as Earth's leaders faced the harsh reality that not all allies were what they seemed. As the truth behind the aliens' mission continued to unfold, a group of humans, inspired by the wisdom and teachings shared, began to take matters into their own hands. They had seen the potential for a new way of living, a way that transcended the chaos and divisions that had long plagued humanity. Guided by the principles of peace, cooperation, and balance that the alien had emphasized, these individuals started working to transform their world, one community at a time. What began as small conversations between like-minded individuals soon blossomed into powerful grassroots movements. People, from all walks of life, began to realize that true change would not come from political leaders or outside forces, but from the collective will of humanity itself. These movements focused on reimagining societal norms, questioning the systems of power, and seeking alternatives that promoted the well-being of all people, not just the privileged few. At the heart of this shift was a deep commitment to environmental stewardship. The alien had shown them the power of advanced technology, how it could be harnessed not for profit or control, but for the betterment of the planet. Renewable energy systems, designed by the aliens' people, began to replace outdated and destructive methods of resource extraction. Sustainable agriculture practices took root as people learned how to work in harmony with the earth, regenerating ecosystems that had been ravaged by centuries of exploitation. But the changes were not limited to the physical world alone. The aliens' philosophy, which emphasized compassion and collective responsibility, began to shape new ways of thinking. Communities, once divided by borders, religions, and ideologies, started working together toward shared goals. People learned to listen to one another, to set aside their differences in favor of common purpose. Former adversaries, united by the vision of a peaceful future, joined forces in efforts to heal the wounds of history. As the new methods of cooperation took hold, the aliens' influence began to spread further. Their peaceful presence had sparked something profound within humanity, a recognition that true power did not lie in dominance or control, but in unity and mutual respect. This realization started to challenge old paradigms of war, greed, and exploitation. Slowly but surely, a new world was being born from the collective efforts of those willing to embrace the aliens' vision. Yet, despite the progress, there were still those who resisted. The forces of old power, threatened by the idea of a society built on equality and sustainability, began to push back. They saw these movements as a direct challenge to their authority and influence, and they fought to maintain the status quo. But for the first time in history, the battle for change was no longer one-sided. The seeds of a new way of life had been planted, and though the path to change was fraught with obstacles, it was one that humanity was now determined to walk. The aliens' presence on Earth had already begun to reshape the course of humanity's future. But there was more to the story, much more than anyone could have imagined. As the days passed, the alien began to reveal the larger cosmic forces at play, forces that were not just of this world, but of the entire universe. It spoke of interdimensional beings, entities that existed beyond the physical realms known to humanity, and how these beings posed a great threat to the peace and balance the aliens sought to establish on Earth. These interdimensional forces, the alien explained, had been watching humanity for eons, intervening in ways both subtle and profound. They existed outside the constraints of time and space, their actions sometimes invisible, but always impactful. They thrived on chaos, conflict, and disorder, feeding off the turbulence that humanity so often created. Their influence was felt in moments of war, political instability, and environmental destruction, as they sought to keep the universe in a state of disharmony. The alien spoke of its people's mission, to ensure that Earth remained untouched by these forces, to prevent the planet from being dragged into a cycle of eternal conflict that would destroy both humanity and the fragile balance of the cosmos. But this was not a mission Earth could complete on its own. Humanity, the alien explained, was at a critical juncture, and their future depended on understanding their place in the universe, a universe far larger and more complex than they had ever imagined. The adventure beyond Earth, the alien promised, would not be limited to the confines of their planet. There were entire galaxies to explore, with civilizations and beings that could offer knowledge and wisdom. There were portals to other dimensions where life forms existed in ways that humanity could not yet comprehend. The question was no longer whether humanity was ready to look up at the stars, but whether they were ready to understand what lay beyond them. The alien spoke of the universe's role in humanity's future, but of the importance of peace, not just on Earth, but across the stars. There was an intergalactic network of civilizations, some ancient, some new, each with its own path toward balance. The aliens' arrival was but a small part of a greater cosmic experiment, one that would shape the future of countless species, not just humanity. Earth's ability to overcome its divisions, to unite and embrace peace, would set a precedent for the universe at large. As the aliens' words echoed in the minds of those who listened, an unspoken understanding began to form. The stakes were far higher than anyone had realized. The path toward peace on Earth wasn't just a local endeavor. It was a cosmic imperative. And humanity, whether they knew it or not, was now part of a much larger story, one that could alter the very fabric of the universe itself. The sense of hope that had begun to settle over Earth, cultivated by the aliens' peaceful message, was shattered one fateful evening. The skies, once a symbol of limitless possibility, darkened with the revelation of a new, unexpected threat. A faction of aliens, different from the one that had arrived with the mission of peace, revealed itself in the most unsettling way. These new beings, unlike the peaceful alien who had sought to guide humanity toward unity, carried a chilling presence. They spoke with cold, commanding voices, their intentions clear from the start. Peace was not their goal. This new faction had been lurking in the background, hidden within the shadows of the universe. Their appearance on Earth was not a coincidence, but a calculated move, one that had been years in the making. They were not interested in peace, nor in the harmonious ideals that had been shared by the first alien. Instead, they sought control and domination. These beings, cloaked in technology far more advanced and incomprehensible than anything humanity had ever seen, viewed Earth as a stepping stone in their grand design to dominate the cosmos. Their vision of the universe was one of strict order, where power was concentrated in the hands of a few, and the chaos of rebellion was eradicated. The alien that had first arrived, the one who had guided humanity with wisdom and peace, revealed that it had known of this faction's existence all along. However, it had hoped to shield humanity from the turmoil of intergalactic conflict. But now, with this faction's sudden emergence, it was clear that the stakes had grown higher. The peaceful alien warned of the cosmic war that was beginning to surface, a war that could engulf not just Earth, but the very fabric of the universe. A war fought not with traditional weapons, but with manipulation, deceit, and the cruel application of technological power. The peaceful alien, who had once been a symbol of hope, now found itself in the role of protector. The task was no longer just about guiding humanity toward peace, but defending Earth from an enemy that would stop at nothing to impose its will. This revelation forced a shift in perspective for those who had embraced the aliens' message. They were no longer merely fighting for peace on Earth, but for survival in a universe that was far more dangerous and complex than they had ever realized. As the threat of war loomed in the cosmic distance, the true test of humanity's resilience and ability to evolve would unfold. Would the lessons of peace and unity be enough to withstand the destructive forces now at play? Or would the darkness of intergalactic war tear the fragile bonds of trust and cooperation apart? The path forward was uncertain, and the stakes higher than ever. The calm that had settled over Earth shattered without warning. The sky, once filled with hopeful visions of peace, was now torn by an unthinkable terror. The hostile alien faction, which had long remained in the shadows, launched their first direct strike on Earth. Their assault came swiftly, without any of the diplomacy or warning that had been expected. Cities around the world trembled as alien ships, dark and foreboding, descended from the heavens. Their weapons, unlike anything humanity had ever seen, unleashed a fury that sent shockwaves through the planet. Humanity's newfound hope of unity was immediately tested. People who had once embraced the aliens' peaceful philosophy were thrown into chaos as the threat loomed large and unstoppable. The peaceful alien, who had become Earth's guardian, did not hesitate. It made its presence known on every global broadcast, urging humanity to stand together. The alien had long been prepared for such an event, aware that some factions would never accept peace. Its technology, an intricate weave of advanced science and timeless wisdom, became the first line of defense against the brutal onslaught. But it was not enough to simply rely on the aliens' technology. Humanity, having spent decades developing its own strength, had to rise to the challenge. The alien, aware of the importance of collaboration, encouraged Earth's leaders to combine their resources, military strategies, and scientific ingenuity with its own advanced systems. The result was an unprecedented alliance between human might and alien intelligence. The defensive systems, bolstered by the technology shared by the peaceful alien, created a shield of light across Earth's atmosphere. But even that was not enough to stop the full force of the enemy. The first attack was unlike anything Earth had experienced. Alien ships cloaked in shadows rained destruction upon Earth's most strategic locations. Cities once bustling with life were now shrouded in the darkness of alien fire. Yet, as humanity struggled to cope with the devastation, they found strength in unity. The peaceful aliens' influence remained, as its technologies empowered Earth's defenses. Human soldiers, once unprepared for such a conflict, fought fiercely, adapting and learning quickly. The first battle was a mixture of human resilience and alien brilliance, each forging a new path forward in the face of an impossible war. As the battle unfolded, the true stakes of the war began to crystallize. Earth's survival was no longer a question of military power alone. It was about unity, hope, and the enduring belief that peace could still be achieved, even in the face of overwhelming odds. Yet, the enemy showed no sign of retreat. The first attack was only the beginning. The world held its breath, knowing that this was just a taste of the dark forces that threatened to tear their peaceful world apart. The fight for peace had only just begun. The fall of empires did not come in the form of alien invasion or cosmic warfare. Instead, it came from within, from the hearts and minds of those who had once stood beside the peaceful alien in their quest for a united world. The betrayal was subtle at first, a whispering of doubts, a slow erosion of trust. What had begun as a movement to heal the world now lay on the cusp of collapse, shattered by the very hands that had once raised it up. Human leaders, tempted by power, greed, and the pressure of their own broken systems, made choices that would forever alter the course of history. The alien, a being of wisdom and patience, watched as the fragile unity that had once seemed so promising unraveled. The foundation of the peaceful movement, so carefully cultivated over years of effort, was torn apart by the very people it had sought to heal. Leaders, who had once spoken passionately about the need for peace, now bowed to the temptations of old power structures. They made secret deals with the very forces that sought to dismantle the peace. They allowed corruption to seep into the heart of the movement, placing their own interests ahead of the greater good. The peaceful alien, who had long believed in the potential of humanity, found itself reflecting on the imperfection of its allies. It had seen the hope in humanity's eyes, the willingness to change, to build a new world. But now, as it witnessed the crumbling of that dream, the alien wondered if it had misjudged the nature of humans. The choice to trust them had been its own, but the consequences of that trust were far more painful than it could have ever imagined. It was not the enemy that had brought down the peaceful cause. It was the human desire for power, for control, for dominance. As the leaders turned on each other, casting aside their commitment to peace in exchange for personal gain, the movement splintered. The streets, once filled with hope, now rang with discord. There were no longer calls for unity, but cries of disillusionment. The alien, once so sure of humanity's capacity for change, now faced the reality that peace could not be imposed from the outside. It had to come from within. In the quiet of reflection, the alien mourned not only for the loss of its dream but for the humanity it had believed in. It had offered its wisdom, its technology, its hope. Yet, despite all its efforts, the human heart remained as fractured as ever. The fall of empires was not a cosmic event. It was the failure of humanity to rise above its own limitations. The alien now understood that the path to peace was never easy, nor was it ever guaranteed. It could only be earned through choices, and too many had chosen the wrong path. In the aftermath of the devastation caused by the conflict, the peaceful alien stood in silence, contemplating the fractured world before it. The dust had settled, and the remnants of war left scars across the Earth's landscape, both visible and hidden. The once promising dream of a united world, a peaceful future, now seemed distant, buried beneath the rubble of human failure. Yet, even in this moment of despair, the alien did not falter in its resolve. Its mission was not one of conquest or retribution, but of healing. And so, despite the setbacks and betrayals, it returned to its purpose, the restoration of peace. The alien began by reaching out to the leaders who still held the potential to guide their people. It did not demand their submission or obedience, but offered them an opportunity for dialogue. It sought to foster understanding where there had been division, and compassion where there had been hatred. Human history, the alien knew, had been marred by cycles of war and strife, but it also held within it the possibility for redemption. Reconciliation would not be easy, but the alien believed that, through honest conversation and shared vision, the wounds of the past could begin to heal. It helped the factions that had once waged war on one another to meet, face to face. The alien did not impose its will but acted as a neutral mediator, guiding them toward mutual understanding. In those tense, often painful moments of negotiation, the alien spoke not just of peace, but of the necessity of embracing vulnerability. It reminded the warring parties that true strength lay not in domination, but in cooperation, and that only through shared effort could they rebuild the world they had torn apart. The alien's message began to resonate with the people as well. Communities that had been torn apart by violence and suspicion found themselves coming together, slowly at first, but with a growing sense of solidarity. The alien's presence became a symbol of hope, a reminder that even in the darkest of times, the possibility for renewal remained. It taught the people of Earth that reconciliation did not mean forgetting the past but learning from it and building a future that honored the mistakes made and the lessons learned. Over time, the alien's influence grew, not as a force that imposed peace from above, but as a quiet catalyst for change. The alien's approach was never to force understanding, but to encourage it through patience and empathy. As leaders began to reconcile with one another, their followers began to do the same. The scars of war were still present, but they no longer defined humanity. Slowly, the alien saw its mission unfold, not through grand gestures, but in the quiet moments of human connection, the small acts of forgiveness that began to spread across the planet. And so, the alien remained, not as a conqueror, but as a witness to humanity's resilience, its capacity for growth, and its unyielding hope that peace could one day be more than just a dream. As time passed, the alien's teachings began to take root in ways both visible and subtle. The world, once fractured by divisions of power, wealth, and ideology, now found itself in the midst of a profound transformation. The alien's wisdom, woven into the fabric of daily life, encouraged humanity to look beyond its limitations, to reach for something higher. In the years that followed, a new era began to unfold, marked by a commitment to cooperation, sustainability, and unity. The alien's technology, once seen as a potential threat, was now embraced as a tool for progress. Clean energy sources replaced fossil fuels, and the Earth, burdened by centuries of environmental destruction, began to heal. Cities that once teemed with pollution found themselves bathed in clean light, their streets lined with green spaces, their air crisp and breathable. The aliens' advanced medical knowledge, once a subject of skepticism, led to cures for diseases that had long plagued humanity. Life expectancy rose, and the fear of illness that had once gripped so many began to wane. But the aliens' greatest gift was not the technology it provided. It was the philosophy of balance that it instilled in the hearts and minds of people everywhere. No longer obsessed with endless growth, humanity began to focus on sustainability, striving to live in harmony with the planet rather than exploiting it. Leaders who once fought for dominance now collaborated to solve the world's most pressing issues: poverty, hunger, inequality. The alien had shown them that the power of the collective was far greater than the power of the individual, and in this realization, humanity found strength. In the quiet moments of everyday life, the aliens' presence was felt most deeply. People learned to listen to one another, to understand the perspectives of those with whom they disagreed. Cooperation replaced competition, and kindness became the foundation of society. The old systems of power that had once divided humanity gave way to new institutions built on fairness, justice, and compassion. The aliens' mission, once a distant hope, had become a reality. A world where peace was not just a fleeting dream, but a living, breathing force that shaped every interaction, every decision. As the years stretched into decades, the world continued to evolve. The lessons of the past were honored, not through memorials or monuments, but through the very way people lived. The alien, watching from the sidelines, understood that the real work of peace had not been its alone to do. It had been humanity's choice to embrace the teachings, to take the first step toward a better future. And though the aliens' time on Earth was finite, its legacy was not. The new era, built on the foundations of unity and understanding, would continue long after the alien had departed. In the end, the rise of this new world was a testament to the enduring power of change, the kind of change that begins not with grand gestures, but with small, deliberate actions taken by individuals working together toward something greater. And with that, humanity stepped fully into a future of peace, guided by the lessons of the past and the wisdom of a distant visitor who had shown them the way. Generations passed, and the world that had once been divided by conflict, greed, and strife was now a place of cooperation, understanding, and shared prosperity. The aliens' visit, though a distant memory to many, had left an indelible mark on humanity's collective soul. Its teachings, once met with skepticism, had become the foundation upon which a new, more harmonious world had been built. The alien's role as a mentor and guide, though subtle, was still felt deeply in every corner of Earth. Children grew up learning not only about science and mathematics, but about the values of empathy, cooperation, and respect for the planet. These were not lessons found in textbooks alone, but lived and breathed in communities across the globe. People no longer saw themselves as isolated individuals or competing nations. They saw themselves as stewards of a shared future, bound by a responsibility to one another and to the Earth. And though the alien had long since returned to the stars, its influence was woven into the very fabric of human existence. The alien had not just given humanity advanced technology, it had imparted wisdom. Wisdom about the dangers of unchecked power and the importance of balance. The lessons were passed down through the generations, becoming a part of the cultural consciousness. The old ways of exploitation and consumption were replaced by sustainable practices that nurtured both the Earth and its inhabitants. Communities came together to solve problems, not just as nations or economic entities, but as members of a larger, interconnected web. The alien had shown them that peace was not just an absence of war, but a state of being that permeated every action, every thought, every choice. And it was in the quiet moments of reflection that humanity truly understood the alien's legacy. It was not just the tangible changes, the clean energy, the medical advancements, the environmental restoration that mattered most. It was the shift in the human spirit, the awakening to the possibility of living in true harmony with one another. The alien had not just shown them a path to a better world. It had shown them that they were capable of creating it themselves. There were still challenges to face, still setbacks and struggles, but the lessons of the alien lived on as a beacon, guiding humanity toward a future where peace was not just a dream, but a reality. The alien, in its quiet wisdom, had asked for nothing in return but had given everything, and in doing so, it had changed the course of human history forever. As the generations continued, each one took up the mantle, carrying the torch of peace into a future that was, at last, within their reach. As time passed, the alien's true purpose gradually revealed itself, though not in the way humanity had first imagined. It had not come merely to bestow peace upon Earth, nor was its mission to offer a temporary solution to the world's endless conflicts. The alien's arrival had been far more profound, far more intricate than anyone could have initially understood. Its purpose had always been to test humanity's capacity to transcend war, not just external conflict, but the internal battles that raged within each individual. The alien had observed humanity for eons, noting patterns of violence and division, yes, but also recognizing something deeply beautiful, an innate potential for growth, for change, for peace. It had chosen to intervene not because humanity was broken, but because it was on the cusp of something extraordinary. The true test was never about the alien's technology or its guidance. It was about humanity's ability to learn, adapt, and evolve. Its visit had been a catalyst, a challenge that forced humans to confront their deepest fears and their greatest potential. As the years unfolded, the alien watched as the seeds of its teachings took root. What had once been a world teetering on the brink of destruction began to transform into a place where cooperation flourished, where understanding surpassed the need for dominance. Wars became a distant memory, not because humanity was perfect, but because they had learned how to face their conflicts without resorting to destruction. The alien saw in this growth something more than peace. It saw the transcendence of the very concept of war. The true purpose of its visit was not to eliminate humanity's flaws, but to show that these flaws were not inherent, nor were they immutable. They were choices, habits learned over time, but habits that could be unlearned. And so, the alien watched as individuals began to let go of their fear, their hate, and their isolation. They embraced vulnerability, communication, and empathy instead of walls, violence, and self-preservation. They discovered that the path to peace was not one of suppression, but of expression, of understanding. Not just tolerating the differences between people, but celebrating them. As the alien reflected on humanity's journey, it saw a species not just surviving, but evolving. It had always known that the power to transcend war was within humans. It had simply required the right moment, the right nudge, to awaken it. And now, as it observed the lasting impact of its mission, it recognized that humanity had not only passed the test, it had exceeded every expectation. The alien's purpose had never been about teaching them how to live without conflict. It had been about showing them how to rise above it, to embrace a new kind of existence where peace wasn't a goal to be reached, but a way of being. And in this, the alien found a quiet satisfaction, knowing that its mission had, at long last, fulfilled its deepest purpose. The day came when the alien, whose presence had changed the very fabric of humanity, prepared to depart. Its time on Earth was drawing to a close, and with it, the final chapter of its mission. As the people who had once looked to it for guidance gathered, there was no sense of sadness or loss, but a profound understanding that the alien's purpose had been fulfilled. It had awakened something within humanity that could not be undone, an understanding that peace was not something given, but something built from within. Before it left, the alien gathered the leaders and thinkers who had helped shape the new world. Its message was not one of farewell, but of encouragement. The alien spoke not as a teacher, but as a witness, one who had come to help humanity see its potential. And now, it was time for humanity to walk the path alone. There was no longer a need for an external force to steer them. The knowledge and wisdom shared during its time on Earth were now within the hearts and minds of every person who had chosen to embrace them. You will no longer need us. The alien's voice echoed in the minds of those gathered. You have learned that peace is not a gift from the stars, but something that grows in the hearts of those who choose it. It is time for you to lead yourselves, to take full responsibility for your future. And with that, it began to fade. Its presence no longer felt in the physical sense, but lingering in the collective consciousness of a world forever altered. Humanity, having once relied on the alien's wisdom and technology, now found itself standing at the precipice of its own destiny. The alien had given them the tools for peace, the knowledge of how to transcend the cycles of war. And now, it was time for them to take the reins. As the alien's form disappeared into the horizon, the world felt both lighter and more grounded. The message had been clear. Humanity was no longer a species dependent on outside intervention, but one capable of shaping its own future. The task ahead would not be easy. There would be challenges, setbacks, and moments of doubt, but the foundation had been laid. The dream of unity, once sparked by an outsider, had now become a shared vision, carried forward by all. For the first time in history, humanity was truly united, not out of fear, but out of a deep understanding of their own potential. The alien had planted the seed, but it was humanity that would nurture it, allowing it to grow and flourish in ways that were beyond even the alien's foresight. As the sun set on the world that had been forever transformed, the horizon no longer seemed like a limit, but an invitation. The future was no longer uncertain. It was in their hands now, and the journey ahead, though unknown, was one that they would walk together. The world had changed, and so too had its people. The alien's departure marked the beginning of a new era, not just for the planet, but for the very spirit of humanity. The lessons of peace, unity, and responsibility had sunk deep into the hearts of those who had witnessed the transformation. But it was the new generation that would truly carry the flame forward. In cities across the globe, a wave of fresh voices emerged. Young leaders, thinkers, and creatives, inspired by the teachings they had inherited, began to rise, bringing with them a sense of hope and urgency that had once seemed unattainable. These were the individuals who had grown up with the knowledge that peace was not a distant dream, but an achievable reality. They had seen the world rebuilt after the chaos and division that had once plagued it, and now they were ready to take the next steps. They were not just ordinary leaders. They were the architects of a new worldview, one that saw beyond borders, beyond nations, beyond the earth itself. Their eyes were set on the stars, not as distant, unreachable points in the sky, but as symbols of what could be achieved when humanity embraced its highest potential. They knew that the future of the earth lay not just in solving its internal conflicts, but in reaching out to the vast expanse of the universe. And so, the first seeds of interstellar cooperation were sown. Humanity, no longer bound by its past divisions, began to look outward. Discussions and agreements began to take place with alien civilizations, based not on suspicion or fear, but on the shared understanding that all beings, regardless of origin, sought the same fundamental truths: peace, growth, and unity. These young leaders were not bound by the ideologies of the past. They saw the world not in terms of conflict and competition, but as a collective striving toward a common good. They did not shy away from challenges, but welcomed them as opportunities to unite and grow stronger. For them, the lessons of the alien had become a blueprint, one that transcended their individual cultures and backgrounds. As this new generation shaped the future, the planet itself began to feel the effects. Environmental recovery efforts, spearheaded by visionary thinkers, began to turn the tide against the damage caused by centuries of neglect. Technological advancements, now guided by principles of sustainability and ethics, pushed humanity into a new age of exploration and discovery. And as they looked beyond their world, the possibilities seemed endless. Interstellar diplomacy, once a distant dream, it began to take shape as these young leaders formed the foundations of communication and cooperation with other civilizations. What had once been seen as impossible, the idea of humanity joining a larger cosmic community, was now becoming a reality. The Earth was no longer an isolated world, but a member of a greater, interconnected universe. In the years that followed, the aliens' legacy would be carried forward not just by the words it had spoken, but by the actions of those who had embraced its message. The future, once uncertain, now felt full of promise. As humanity took its first steps toward a new era, one defined not by division and conflict, but by understanding and cooperation on a galactic scale. Years had passed since the aliens' departure, but its presence lingered in the hearts and minds of those who had lived through the transformation. Earth had changed in ways that were once unimaginable, but the alien knew that the journey was far from complete. It had promised to return, and now, as the time came, it arrived not with fanfare, but in quiet observation. The world was different, more connected, more united, yet still on the edge of uncertainty. The new generation had taken the lessons to heart, and in the years following the aliens' departure, they had worked tirelessly to push humanity toward a future of peace and cooperation. There was growth, but also challenges. The alien watched from the outskirts, a silent observer of progress and setbacks, waiting to see if humanity would fulfill its potential or succumb to old patterns of division. As it looked over the landscape of a world striving for balance, the alien could sense the shifts. New technologies had transformed daily life, and interstellar communication had bridged the gap between Earth and distant civilizations. The scars of past conflicts still lingered in some places, but they were fewer and further between, a testament to the healing power of time and shared understanding. The alien saw the seeds of what it had hoped for, a world not free from conflict, but one that sought resolution through unity rather than division. The alien's reflection was bittersweet. It could see the efforts, the achievements, but it also knew that true peace was a journey, not a destination. While humanity had made immense strides, there was still much work to be done. The divisions that had once nearly torn the world apart had not fully disappeared. Old habits died hard, and new challenges arose as the global community reached out to the stars. There were voices of dissent, forces that sought to pull humanity back into isolation, into fear of the unknown. But the alien knew these were but ripples in the water, not the wave that would drown humanity's progress. It was not disappointed, nor was it surprised. It understood that true change, deep change, took time. The alien's mission was never to make humanity perfect, but to give it the tools and the vision to grow, and in that, it saw success. The steps had been taken, the foundations laid. The alien had witnessed a world move from divisiveness to collaboration, from isolation to connection. Yet, the alien understood that the path ahead would never be smooth, that the journey of growth would always be one of trial and error. The true test of humanity's progress would not be in its achievements, but in its ability to adapt, to learn, and to continue moving forward despite the obstacles ahead. It was not a perfect world, but it was a world with hope. With a final glance at the planet it had once watched with concern, the alien left once more, its purpose fulfilled, but its journey ongoing. It left humanity with one last thought. Peace was not just a gift, but a responsibility. a responsibility that would rest in their hands now and forever. The years that followed the aliens' final departure were marked by a deep sense of reflection and quiet optimism. Humanity had undergone a transformation unlike anything in its history. The divisions that had once seemed insurmountable had faded into the background, replaced by an emerging sense of unity. It was not a perfect world, no world ever was, but it was a world that had learned, through trial and hardship, that peace was not just an absence of conflict, but a way of being, a way of thinking. People moved through their lives with a renewed sense of purpose, guided by the lessons passed down from that long-ago visitor. The alien had come not to solve humanity's problems for it, but to help it see the way forward. And now, as the years turned into decades, the legacy of that visit was woven into the fabric of everyday existence. The technologies it had shared had sparked revolutions in energy, medicine, and communication, all of which contributed to a world where the needs of individuals were met with greater care and understanding. The promise of abundance through sustainable energy had allowed nations to focus less on survival and more on progress. The journey was far from over. As humanity ventured further into space, the challenges of exploring new frontiers echoed those of their own planet's history. Yet, there was a difference. For the first time, the explorers of the stars did not go as conquerors or competitors. They ventured out with a deep sense of shared responsibility, knowing that the lessons learned from their history would guide them through the unknown. The fear of the alien other had been replaced by a willingness to understand, to learn, and to embrace the unknown with curiosity rather than suspicion. In every corner of the earth, there was a quiet hum of possibility. People came together not just for common goals but for a shared vision, a vision that reached beyond the boundaries of their own nations, their own species. The stars, once a distant, unreachable dream, now beckoned as the next chapter of humanity's story. But it was not a story written in the stars. It was a story written by the people of Earth, who had finally realized that their future lay not in isolation but in collaboration. Looking back, the aliens' message seemed simple. Peace was not an event, but a way of being. It was a choice made each day by each individual, a choice to listen, to understand, and to strive for something greater than oneself. And now, as the people of Earth reached out toward the stars, they did so with wisdom, with a sense of unity that had once seemed impossible. The alien had shown humanity its potential, and in the quiet, the hopeful gaze toward the future, humanity had become what it was always meant to be, not perfect, but capable. Capable of creating peace not just for itself, but for the entire universe. The stars were no longer a reminder of the unknown, but a promise of what was to come, a future built on the foundation of peace.